Hey everybody, my name is TurtleZoom, and welcome to something a little different. Story explanations have been working really well for this channel, so I decided to try something new today. As some of you know, I am a long-time Overwatch fan, at least until I start losing.
F***ing accelerator's pissing me the... I hate this
While the gameplay is something I can certainly improve upon, I'm absolutely in love with this game's characters and its intriguing lore. What we know about the lore doesn't actually come so much from the game itself. The game gives us glimpses of the lore through character interactions and stuff like that, but not a clear picture. The animated shorts, comics, and short novels paint a clearer but still not complete picture, though I do highly recommend you check them out if you haven't. As of right now, Overwatch 2 is on the horizon and is going to feature a story mode, which is why I wanted to release this now so I can show you guys my theory, just in case it turns out to be true. With that being said, let's dive in to what I have dubbed the Red Eyes theory. So, the short version of the story is this. Many years into the future, humanity invents a new type of robot called an Omnic. These Omnics were unlike any other machine because they actually became self-aware. Of course, they were used for cheap labor at first until the Omnics banded together and demanded human rights. This unleashed a great war called the First Omnic Crisis. This war went on for several years until an international organization called Overwatch stepped in to end the conflict, to which they more or less succeeded. Global peace was secure, but tensions between Omnic and human were still high. After the war, Overwatch set its sights on taking down Talon, a powerful terrorist organization bent on improving humanity through conflict and war. Overwatch ran into trouble, however, once its secret undercover Black Ops unit, Blackwatch, was uncovered during a failed kidnapping turned assassination in Italy. The public ended up turning on Overwatch until the whole organization got shut down and was deemed illegal by the United Nations Petrus Act. On top of that, their headquarters was bombed by parties unknown, leaving several people dead and others presumed so. Because of Overwatch's absence, Talon was left unchecked. The second Omnic crisis in Russia was flaring up. Omnic extremist groups like Null Sector were coming to power, and overall, things were looking pretty effed. One of Overwatch's former members, Winston, a genetically altered gorilla, saw all the devastation left in their absence and made the decision to call his allies back together once again to fight for justice and save lives. That's pretty much the gist of it. So the story sounds pretty simple, right? Well, it would be, if not for the subtle clues Blizzard has been dropping ever since the game's release. Clues that lead me to believe there is a third entity at play here. I believe that the first Omnic crisis was actually orchestrated by one being, the same being that is fueling the second in Russia on both sides, and was the direct cause of the collapse of Overwatch, all while hiding in plain sight. Do I have your attention? Good, because I think what I've found is the true enemy of Overwatch, and it all starts with our favorite purple-clad hacker. This narrative is full of amazing characters, all of which fit this story pretty well, except for one little oddity: Sombra. Most of the characters are pretty easy to diagnose as good or evil. Overwatch or Talon or sometimes neutral, but Sombra is the odd one out. Her character introduction and animated short are of particular interest in this case. Her origin story video details that Sombra was orphaned by the first Omnic crisis, like many other children. After losing her parents, she took to computers and became a world-class hacker, the likes of which couldn't be matched, until one day her exploits were noticed by an unknown entity, represented by nothing but a white and red symbol of an eye. Later in this video, she says,
"I'll find out who really runs the world."
Followed by the display of a map, connecting everything to that same eye symbol in the middle. This is what got my theory brain working. To me, what she is saying here is that there is more to the conflict between Omnics, Overwatch, and Talon, and that someone is pulling the strings from behind the scenes, something Sombra has dedicated herself to exposing. Now, the symbol that we're shown representing this puppet master appears nowhere else in the whole series. It's just in this one animation that it ever shows up. This symbol has to have significance. Ask yourself this. Where else in the story of Overwatch do we have something represented by an eye?
We are all one within the iris.
Pass into the iris.
That's right. It's the iris. It's my crackpot theory that the iris is a massively powerful and evil AI. Perhaps the first AI that came into existence, which took over the minds of all other Omnics to start the first Omnic crisis. Because of Overwatch, it lost the war and was forced into hiding. Perhaps the Shambali religion the Iris is a part of is all a facade the Iris created to hide in plain sight, while behind the scenes the Iris fuels the second Omnic crisis in Russia, decimates Overwatch, and uses the second conflict and its religious cover to buy itself time, to prepare for its second attempt to destroy humanity. Well, I guess that's why they call them the Shambali. I'll leave. This would also perfectly explain Sombra's motivations. If the Iris started the first war, then it is directly responsible for the deaths of her parents. Perhaps her goal is just some good old-fashioned revenge. But Turtle, I hear you typing at me in the comments, you can't just jump to that conclusion just because that symbol was an eye. It could be coincidence. And you're right. I have more evidence than that, my friends. Which all starts with the Shambali. What do we really know about the Shambali? They're a religion that originated in Nepal. Their message states that humans and Omnics are all equals and have souls, and that all life exists within an entity called the Iris. Shambali monks such as Zenyatta are able to use the Iris for healing purposes and can even use it as a weapon of sorts. And their mission is to promote peace and unity throughout the entire world. Beyond that, nothing. The only character in the game from the Shambali is Zenyatta, who pretty much only speaks in proverbs.
No snowflake ever falls in the wrong place. Pain is an excellent teacher, do I think? Does a submarine swim? Adversity is an opportunity for change.
His bio on playoverwatch.com does give us some further details though. Quote, "Years ago, following the Omnic crisis, a group of outcast Omnic robots experienced what they described as a spiritual awakening. They abandoned their pre-programmed lives to establish a communal monastery deep in the Himalayas. After many years of meditation on the nature of existence, they came to the belief that they were more than artificial intelligences, and that, like humans, they possessed the essence of a soul." End quote. That's really all we know about them, and the whole mystery surrounding them goes even further. Zenyatta's bio explains that he's actually only a former member of the Shambali, and fans of Overwatch have been asking for Zenyatta lore for years now, but Blizzard has never once delivered. No animated shorts, no short novels, no comics, nothing. Almost as if there's something important they can't yet reveal. Heck, the Shambali practice is even a mystery to the other characters in-game. Just listen to this conversation that can be heard between Mercy and Zenyatta.
Zenyatta, I must admit I do understand how your healing works.
And I do not understand much of how you heal, Dr. Ziegler. I suppose we must all take some things on faith.
I don't think the mysterious nature surrounding these guys is a coincidence. I believe that they're going to play a much larger role in the upcoming story. But what makes me think the Iris is an AI, you ask? Well, for one thing, the founders of the Shambali were all Omnics, meaning that the AI could speak to them in their heads easily, fooling them into thinking it was a god. Plus, it just makes too much sense to hide in plain sight as a benevolent deity to buy itself time. Remember, the religion was founded shortly after the end of the first Omnic crisis, only after the AI was beaten the first time by Overwatch. Fortunately for it, nobody figured out that the AI existed, as it led people to think the first war was simply fought for Omnic civil rights. So not only is the Iris well hidden, nobody is even looking for it. At least not until someone stumbled onto something they shouldn't have. The Iris was either using the time it had to prepare for another war, or was systematically destabilizing the world, and Sombra must have found evidence of this while hacking. That is why the Iris tried to shut her down and attacked her system. It may have even been trying to kill her somehow. Unfortunately for it, that attempt backfired and gave Sombra new motivation to find it and ultimately destroy it, which brings us to Infiltration. In the animated short that came out with Sombra's game release, Infiltration, Sombra is working with Talon agents Reaper and Widowmaker to assassinate the CEO of a Russian weapons development company, Katya Volskaya. When her comrades get close, she sets off the alarm to foil their plans, and ends up alone with her in her panic room. Instead of killing her, however, she shows Katya images of her receiving the technology she was just taking credit for from the Omnics she's supposedly fighting, in order to blackmail her. At face value, this really doesn't make any sense at all. Why would the Omnics give their enemy technology to help fight them?
Here, please hit me as hard as you can.
It starts to make sense once you consider that maybe the conflict happening in Russia is simply a means to an end. The fighting is all just for show, a smokescreen, meant to keep the attention of organizations like Overwatch and Talon. Just another method of buying the Iris more time. And Katya? She's just going along with it because the conflict is making her filthy rich, which Sombra uses as a way in. Remember, her goal is to unravel this mystery, and Katya is a loose thread to be tugged on, and a source of valuable information. Sombra even explains herself to Zarya in her comic, Searching. Quote, "Here's the thing, Katya lied to you, twice. I want her in power. There's something bigger going on. It will affect everyone, everything. And I thought she was the one who was going to help me get to the bottom of it." End quote. Zarya then reveals to Sombra here that she knows her real name, Olivia Colomar. This is suspicious because Sombra worked very hard to cover up her previous life, erasing all evidence of her past. She was so sure that nobody could find it. She even said this in her origin story.
Who is Sombra? To the system, she's nobody. She doesn't exist.
This begs the question, how did Zarya find her real name? Well, in that same animation, we're shown a glimpse of the one entity able to beat Sombra's computer skills, so it's safe to say they're the culprit. And if it was the Iris who found this information, then that would confirm its connection to Katya, who would then give Sombra's name to Zarya. The next point I want to touch on regards the Omnics themselves. You may notice that throughout the series, whenever there is a good Omnic, like the Citizens or even some playable characters like Zenyatta or Bastion, they have blue eyes. However, whenever there is an evil Omnic like the Null Sector terrorists, Talon members like Maximilian, or the troops of the first Omnic Crisis, they have red eyes. This could be written off as an aesthetic choice on Blizzard's part. Blue means good and red means bad, but what if it's more than that? What if there is an in-universe explanation for why their eyes are different colors? Enter The Last Bastion. The Last Bastion is an animated short about a single Omnic soldier unit called a Bastion, waking up in an unknown forest. You should notice that his eye is blue, and after waking up, he starts to explore. He acts as though everything he's experiencing is brand new, like a baby in his first day of being alive. You know, just with more machine guns. Bastion's bio on playoverwatch.com explains this a bit further. Quote, "With its combat programming all but lost, it instead displayed an intense curiosity about the natural world and its inhabitants. This inquisitive Bastion unit set out to explore its surroundings and discover its purpose on a war-ravaged planet." End quote. He's basically the Curious George of Murderbots, as he wanders the forest, discovering more and more things. As soon as he hears what sounds like gunfire, his eye turns red, and he goes full Murderbot mode. Quote again, "Though Bastion appears to be gentle, even harmless at times, its core combat programming takes over when the unit senses danger, utilizing its entire arsenal to eliminate anything it perceives as a threat." End quote. Now, I want to draw some attention to his behavior in this scene. As soon as his eye turns red, something seemed like it took over his body. Notice his reaction to the broken nest on the ground. After his eye turns blue again, he has to look around and piece together the fact that it was him that caused that damage in front of him, almost as if his consciousness was taken over for those few seconds. This happens again later in the short when he reads the hard drive of a deceased Bastion that he finds, and catches a glimpse of the battle that took place there. His eye turns red again, and he begins marching towards the city to complete his mission before being snapped out of it by his new bird friend. So this scene and Bastion's bio prove that the red eyes have meaning. When an Omnic has red eyes, it means they're being controlled by something. However, there's one more quote from his bio that still bothered me. Quote, "Originally created for peacekeeping purposes, Bastion robot units possess the unique ability to rapidly reconfigure themselves into an assault cannon mode. But during the Omnic Crisis, they were turned against their human makers, forming the bulk of the Omnic's rebel army." End quote. They were turned against their human makers feels like very deliberate phrasing here. This line is outright confirming that they were forced to turn against humanity by something else, and they were not fighting of their own free will during the first Omnic Crisis. What's more is that our prime suspect for who forced the Omnics into war is represented to us by a big red eye. I don't know about you guys, but I'm getting the chills here. I should also note that the Omnic shown handing Katya Volskaya the weapons technology also has red eyes, proving that it's the Iris that's been making deals with her this whole time, and not some independent Omnic or organization. Believe it or not, this red eye connection goes even further in Reinhardt's cinematic Honor and Glory. In it, we get a flashback to the first Omnic crisis, where we see the German forces, the Crusaders, fighting off the Omnic soldiers. Not only do these Omnics have red eyes, but just look at their behavior. Are they growling? The Omnic crisis was supposed to be portrayed as them fighting for civil rights, but these guys aren't acting like individuals with personalities. They're acting like beasts, monsters even, and now we know why. They're being controlled. You know who else has red eyes? Maximilian, the wealthy talent agent who handles the group's money. Unlike the other Omnics with red eyes, Maximilian is able to speak and is very much intelligent. If my red eye theory is correct, and even Max here is being controlled by the Iris, then what could the Iris be using him for? Well, we know that Max is part of Talon's elite, and he's likely being used as a way to monitor and manipulate the organization from within. Talon is, after all, powerful enough to rival Overwatch, which makes them a threat, meaning Max is there as insurance of sorts. So, there you have it. The game's major conflict is not Overwatch versus Talon, my friends. It's Sombra versus the Iris, which actually brings me to my last major point: Overwatch's gameplay. Clearly, the events of the gameplay aren't actually canon to the lore, right? After all, you can have duplicates of the same people working together who would never do so normally, and people fighting against each other who would normally be allies. Not to mention the respawning, lack of limited ammo, and all that stuff. This got me thinking, what could the gameplay actually be in order to fit into the lore? When doing my research for this episode, I may have actually stumbled upon the answer. If you look again at the last Bastion cinematic, there are a few moments where we are given a first-person view from Bastion's perspective. Take a look at the heads-up display. Do you see it? The symbols for his cooldown abilities right there in the bottom right corner, exactly where those cooldown abilities are shown in our own heads-up display in-game. He's even got something resembling a health percentage in the bottom left corner to boot. So, if the heads-up display is meant to be what an Omnic like Bastion actually sees, then how are all the human characters seeing the same heads-up display with their own abilities? Are all of them actually Omnics? Well, no. It's actually simpler than that. I believe that the gameplay matches that we know and love are actually simulations being run by the Iris. It's running as many different scenarios as it can, even ones that don't make sense, just to prepare for its coming conflict. Think of it like what Doctor Strange did with the Time Stone during the events of Infinity War, only instead of looking ahead in time, it's just computer-generated simulations. Everything we have been doing as the player has been from the perspective of the Iris, simply trying to gain an edge for the coming conflict. But there was one final thing about the gameplay that has always bothered me. It's actually the very thing that got me working my theory brain in the first place. Whenever you enter the Hero Select menu, you are always greeted with the same message. You hear it every single time you start any sort of match. Select your hero. Why would all of the game's characters be considered heroes? Characters like Mercy, Tracer, Winston, sure, but Doomfist? Reaper? And Widowmaker? How can all of them be heroes too? Even Roadhog and Junkrat fall under this category. That's actually another thing. What purpose do the Junkers actually serve? They have absolutely zero involvement with either Overwatch or Talon. They're just Australian thieves roaming the world on a crime spree, and yet they're prominent characters who have been in the game since day one. Plus, if the gameplay is just meant to be a series of simulations, then why is the Iris including them? Could they really just be comic relief included by Blizzard? I don't think so. There must be a real reason for Blizzard's choice to call these characters heroes. Think about it. If the Iris is gearing up to destroy the world by manipulating Talon and Overwatch into killing each other, then what can Sombra do to stop it? I believe Sombra is planning to actually unite Talon and Overwatch and even bring the Junkers into the fold, along with other independent heroes like Hanzo, Zenyatta, Zarya, and Lucio to come together and fight against the Iris. From a storytelling perspective, this would make perfect sense. After all that these people have been through, they have to put aside their differences to unite against a common enemy. And Sombra can pull it off. We already know that she is a member of Talon, but we know she also has connections with Overwatch too. Baptiste is actually revealed to be a close friend of hers at the end of his short story, What You Left Behind by Alyssa Wong. And we also know that Baptiste has connections to Dr. Ziegler, aka Mercy. This next connection is a bit more subtle, but during the Bastet short story by Michael Chu, Soldier 76, Overwatch's former commander, Jack Morrison, is reunited with former Overwatch agent Ana Amari, both of them presumed dead, now working as vigilantes. In this short story, there was one line that caught my attention. Quote, "After Jack left, Ana switched on her computer. Jack had been using it earlier, and the screen was cluttered with articles about Reaper's movements and appearances. Ana wondered who had been supplying Jack with some of this information, but that was a puzzle for another time. He was following a spiderweb of corporations, government officials, and financial institutions, all hopelessly tangled together through corrupt arteries and shady intermediaries. It was the sort of problem that was never Jack's strong suit." End quote. The phrasing of these lines feels incredibly deliberate. Clearly, they're hinting that someone is helping Soldier 76 with his missions by feeding him information. Information about a spider web of corruption. Sound familiar? This strongly suggests that Sombra is also helping Soldier. We can even visit the necropolis this short story takes place in-game, and we can see the computer Ana was talking about. Soldier's connection to Sombra is also hinted at by the newspaper next to his bed, conveniently turned to an article about a global hacking spree. Coincidence? I think not. Let's summarize. It's my firm belief that the Iris was the first AI to be born among the Omnics. It became powerful enough to dominate the minds of all other Omnics, and started the first Omnic crisis. Using the Shambali religion as a front after its defeat at the hands of Overwatch, it destroyed Overwatch headquarters, created a second Omnic crisis in Russia, gave rise to Talon, and has sown the seeds of conflict all over the world. If it couldn't destroy the world, it'll just get the world to destroy itself. Sombra's goal is to light a fire under the Iris and ultimately destroy it. Whether she's doing it to save the world, for her own gains, as revenge for her parents' deaths, or just because she's bored, doesn't really matter. It's her mission, and perhaps in the future, that mission will be to bring Overwatch, Talon, the Deadlock Gang, the Junkers, and even all the independent fighters together to destroy the Iris once and for all. Holy crap, that was another long one. I know I've said this before, but that was the hardest video I've ever had to make, but man, am I glad that I did. This was actually, believe it or not, a theory I came up with a long time ago, and I actually posted it to Reddit. Back then, I thought the Shambali were just war profiteers, but hey, some things have changed since then, obviously. I want to give special thanks to Sleepy Sigh and Ripley Blue, both good friends of mine who helped me record the background footage you saw today. Go show them some love on Twitch and on YouTube. Finally, I wanted to say I'm sorry for being absent for so long. I had a lot of personal stuff I needed to work on, and I couldn't focus on any videos and work on those at the same time, so I kind of had to make compromises, so that's why I've been gone. I wouldn't say that those issues are resolved just yet, but taking the time to edit this video together was a huge first step. It feels so good to be back. I hope you guys enjoyed today's video, and I will see you guys again soon. Check out my Twitch and my Twitter, and I will see you guys next time. Turtle Zoom is back, baby! I am now recording, although we're probably not going to use any of this actual audio. Yeah, it's just going to be background footage.
I can say wee wee cheese then.
That's going in the video. Bonus clip.